boys, it seems like the Wolves are running it back, signing Reid and Julius Randle to big contracts over the weekend and making some moves elsewhere, declining the options for Luka Garza and Josh Minot, though according to reports, Garza may be back. We'll see. But it appears that the Wolves are mostly running it back. There's a couple rumors on trades of Dante DiVincenzo in the works. Not Nikhil Alexander Walker obviously won't fit with the contract that he's most likely going to get, so it'll be a sign and trade or he'll just move on elsewhere. But Will, let's start with you. Your reaction to the Wolves just running it back with this roster when it seemed like this offseason they're going to make another big move, and now it looks like they're not going to.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what could still happen over the remainder of this offseason, but I have no issue with it. I think we've gotten sort of used to almost the big splashes from the Rudy Gobert trade to a lesser extent the deal that brought Conley and Nah here, and then obviously the Cat Randle DiVincenzo trade just before the start of last season. But that's not like the norm in the NBA or in pro sports at all. I mean, sometimes you get those big splashes, but I don't think that that should be the expectation every single offseason. Like, I think that taking the smart approach here might just mean running it back and not making any sort of all-in big splashy move like trading for Kevin Durant would have been, which the Wolves reportedly had real interest in, but they didn't get that done. So I can totally understand wanting to give this team a full season to see if, some of the stuff we saw with Julius Randle finding his stride late last season and in the first couple rounds of the playoffs, if that can continue over a full year. It won't be the exact same team. Nah is almost certainly going to be gone. You're going to see Terrence Shannon Jr. probably in that rotation spot. More Jalen Clark, more Rob Dillingham, maybe less Mike Conley. Maybe we see a little bit of Jean Behringer, probably not. But yeah, I think the argument is some of the young guys taking a step. And then, I mean, when you think about it, the three core long-term guys on this roster are Ant, Jaden, and Nas, and they're all like 24, 25, 26. So they're not necessarily at their peak either yet. So you could continue to see growth from those guys. So I get it. I know that it's maybe not the most exciting thing in the world if we're talking about Kevin Durant and Darius Garland and all these different names. They'll probably add a point guard of some sort, I would guess, maybe just for the league minimum, maybe for a little bit more than that. But yeah, I think running it back actually can make quite a lot of sense with this roster.
Tony, your reaction to the Wolves running it back this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Durant thing was like the big flashy idea that I think so many people at least had an opinion on. There were a lot of people who liked it, a lot of people against it. And I mean, we saw the Pacers just make a deep run with not really any true like superstar or any like Tyrese Halliburton's a great player, but like their team was built on cohesion and chemistry. And sometimes that's all you need, where the Wolves have now shown that this core can get it done, but they just have one more hump to get over. And I think a small move like a Tyus Jones, like we wrote about today on Timberwolves on SI, that can be a small thing, that just a tweak in this big machine that they have going now. That because we've seen too that injuries happen, and that can completely shake up an entire conference. Maybe we see someone go down on the Thunder, someone go down on the Nuggets, and then that opens things up even more. So I think running it back is probably the best idea in the short term. Now we've seen them extend Julius Randle and Nas Reid for a few years, and I think it's just sound team building strategy, and you kind of just need to hope that Ant takes that MVP leap, and maybe Jaden McDaniels takes that All-Star leap, and then we're looking at a different team this time next year.
Do you guys feel, and you guys have mentioned the need to build, or the idea of building cohesion on this roster by running it back like they are, do you think that actually gets them closer to getting over the Western Conference title hump, rather than bringing in another star player and then having to go through another season of figuring out how all these pieces fit together like we saw this season with Julius Randle and how big of a switch that was for the Wolves and how long it took them to finally gel? Does running it back with mostly this same roster intact? I mean, there's obviously, we talked about Na most likely being gone. Does running it back get them closer to getting over the Western Conference title hump, Will?
Yeah, I think it definitely can. And you make a good point that a couple times in recent years after these huge trades, they've had these acclimation periods where they had to first they had to get used to playing with Rudy Gobert, which took a while because Rudy Gobert is a pretty unique player on both ends of the court. And then we saw kind of a couple years after that with mostly the same core and without any
Mm-hmm.
huge moves. They had their peak regular season in 23-24. They won 56 games. And then last year, you make the Cat for Randle trade, and you've got another acclimation period where you're learning how to play with Julius Randle and how to play with Dante DiVincenzo, and how to adjust defensively without the two big fives. And they eventually figured it out, but they won 49 games. They won 7 fewer than the year before, and they would have won fewer than 49 if it hadn't been for it was like a 17-4 closing stretch. So I think, yeah, you can definitely make the argument that if you run it back with this same team, minor tweaks of let's maybe add a bridge point guard between Conley and Dillingham, who are on opposite ends of the age spectrum. And we play Terrence Shannon Jr. more. We play Jalen Clark. So just certain things like that. Maybe they add another big, like a center in the kind of Luka Garza role who might actually play a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, you could definitely see this team kind of finding its stride early in the regular season and winning 50, 55, maybe even more games and setting themselves up with a really strong seed for the postseason. Will it be enough to get over the hump in the Western Conference Final? I mean, even to get back to the Western Conference Finals, which isn't just something that we can assume every year they're going to do. That's a difficult achievement to be in the Final Four. We'll see. But if that's the plan, and it seems like it's going to be, you're banking on, year 2 familiarity for Randle and Dante. You're banking on, like Tony said, Ant kind of going to that MVP, first team All NBA level. Which the Wolves haven't had a first team All NBA guy since KG in 04. And Jaden, if he can do for the second year in a row, like if he can do what he did in the previous year's playoffs, I think it was last year he averaged like 12 in the playoffs, which was up from whatever, and then he averaged 12 in this regular season, and then he averaged 15 in these playoffs. So can he average 15 in the regular season next year? That would be massive. And then, yeah, some of the young guys coming along as well. So I definitely think that it makes a lot of sense to kind of have some cohesion, some continuity, which is something that even like the new owners, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez, have talked about wanting to have. I don't think it has to be some huge swing to switch things up every year just because you lose in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, it certainly feels like there's been a lot of rotation and kind of upheaval from offseason to offseason the past couple of years, having the cohesion and having, I guess, being able to build some trust and some collaboration and the culture that we see so popular among the Vikings discussion. Building that here in Minnesota will help, certainly. Tony, we'll mention Luka Garza and kind of with this idea of running it back, you're trusting that some of these guys some of this youth that you've built up over the last handful of years is going to develop. How much faith do we have in the youngsters that the Wolves do have on the roster? They've got, it feels like, a deep pool of young talent that just never really gets used for one reason or the other during the season. How much faith do we have in those guys being able to be key contributors for this team this season?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for the NBA because with the second apron now and all the salary cap restrictions, I think teams are going to lean a lot more on their farm system, for lack of a better term, and their development, because having rotational guys on cheaper contracts is going to be so valuable for your flexibility as a team. And I'm not going to pretend like I know all the rules, but there's a lot of like trade stuff too, where you want to be under that second apron, and having a guy like Terrence Shannon on his rookie deal compared to Na at 9 or 10 mil a year is a big difference when you add that up at a couple different positions. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker today probably is a better player than Terrence Shannon Jr., but it wouldn't shock me if Terrence Shannon Jr. came in and had the same level of production next year. And I think you kind of have to see it. The Wolves have the guys to fill that spot with Shannon and Clark. And I'm confident that they can do it. They're definitely talented enough to do it. And now they've both been in the NBA for a couple of years. And I think it's time you just kind of have to rip off the Band-Aid and start using your farm system, because they've had these guys with Leonard Miller, who we haven't even mentioned, who's now entering his third year in the NBA, and we really haven't seen him play at all in a significant role. He's still only 21, 22, but there becomes a point you want to see what you have with those guys. And with this running it back idea, I think the secondary part of it is they can kind of see what they have with some of these guys without making the big move, because we saw that in the NBA from 2010 to 2020, it felt like, where there were just these massive trades every year that and free agent signings that completely shifted the landscape of who the championship winner is. LeBron was leaving, Kevin Durant was leaving, and I I have a feeling we're just not going to see that many big moves like that anymore, and it's going to be a lot more of teams relying on their scouting and players they already have in their system. And I think the Wolves are doing that this year, so I think we're going to find out how to see how that works.
Yeah, well, you look at the talent that the Wolves have in their youth ranks. Clark, Dillingham, Garza, Shannon, Leonard Miller, as Tony said. You got Juan Juan Berenjay coming in. There's plenty of guys that have that are the prospects, that have the potential talent. It's a matter of whether Chris Finch will use them during the regular season and give them time, as we've seen tends to not do that, tends to not trust those young guys. Can we see those guys get some extended minutes now with this running it back? And can we see those guys get some minutes and become key players for the Wolves?
Yeah, we should. I mean, Chris Finch has already said that Terrence Shannon Jr. will be a
Yeah.
big part of the rotation next year. I think he's the most obvious candidate to benefit in a big way from Nickeil Alexander-Walker being gone, because, I mean, he was a rookie last year, but he's already about to be 25 years old. I was saying, like, I don't think it even makes sense for him to play in summer league. He's proved himself against
Yeah.
that level of competition, and I think he'd just go out there and dominate. Like when he averaged 40 a game in 3 G League games last year. So I think he's going to be a big part of it, and that'll be really exciting, because what we've seen from him when he's played has just been a lot of fun with how relentlessly he attacks the rim and gets downhill and can get to that left hand. As far as the other guys, I think Rob Dillingham, as of right now, would be projected to play a real rotational role, because Mike Conley is just getting up there in age, and it's time to really see what the Wolves have in Rob Dillingham, who's the 8th overall pick last year, even if that comes at the expense of some ups and downs early in the year, because it'll sort of, in a way, be another rookie season for him, because he just wasn't in the rotation very much last year, except when some guys were hurt. So I think they really need to see more from Dillingham. Which is why I wonder, like, are they even going to bring in another point guard? If they do, I guess I'm assuming at this point it'll be somebody on like a veteran minimum type deal, like a Tyus Jones, Tyus Jones could start for you, but he could also, you could not play him at all if you wanted to just really give Dillingham a lot of run, like somebody kind of in the Monte Morris role from a couple years ago, who gives you another option but doesn't necessarily have to play. And I think they want to play Jalen Clark too, so we'll see. Finch might have to increase the rotation to 9 or 10 guys early in the year to let some of those young guys find real roles and find their rhythm. I don't know if it's ever going to necessarily happen with Leonard Miller. It could be kind of a situation like Josh Minot, who they just declined the team option on, where you're going to have to go somewhere else to find meaningful minutes. Maybe it happens for Miller here, but I don't know. But I think that, like what we talked about with drafting Berenjay, that makes a lot of sense, because they don't have the I just froze for a second. They don't have the minutes necessarily available. So to have those guys, Berenjay, Rocco Zakarsky, be able to develop behind the scenes, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Final question for you guys today. After the the contract extensions for Nas and then Julius Randle, a lot of talk and then a lot of focus shifted to what the Wolves will do with Dante DiVincenzo. There's been reports that they've been strongly interested in, or they've been strongly shopping him, interested in bringing in some more players to see what they can get out of Dante DiVincenzo. And it felt like when we entered this offseason, it felt like he was the guy that a lot of Wolves fans wanted to keep because of what he brought to this roster. If they do trade him, well, I guess the question is, do you think he'll be traded or do you think he'll still be here next season? I'll start with you, Will.
Yeah, I guess I haven't seen a ton of buzz about the idea of trading Dante. I think fans have certainly been talking about it. I think there was maybe some frustration with his first season in Minnesota not quite going to expectations. I do think that a lot of his struggles were maybe because he was asked to play point guard at times, and he's just not really a point guard, which that's still that's the most fascinating question right now before next season is who is the starting point guard? Is it still very old Mike Conley? Is it very young Rob Dillingham? Is it insert player not currently on the roster? Is it Dante DiVincenzo? I think that would be a mistake. I think Dante needs to be like a rotational backup too, and not he can play point guard in a pinch, but it just doesn't seem to be the best role for him. So we'll see. But I mean, you still look at it and you're thinking he had a down year, and he shot 40% from three on high volume, and played well for the most part. So I think the Wolves should keep him. I think that shooting is really valuable, and he's on a team friendly contract for a couple more years, which would increase his trade worth. But like with Randle, I think you could see a better Dante DiVincenzo for the full regular season in year two.
Tony, do you see DiVincenzo still here next year?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Will. After they missed out on Durant, and now across the league, a few all the other trades, the Lonzo Ball, the Colin Sexton, I highly doubt they're going to make a big splash. But you never know. The cat thing came out of nowhere last year, but I don't think they're going to go after a guy like Darius Garland or De'Aaron Fox. And then, why would you really be trading Dante DiVincenzo if you're not getting a guy like that in return? We've talked about the chemistry and keeping the team together. But it is interesting at what they're going to do at point guard. Because I remember it was a similar question last year. I mean, they had the same backcourt players on the roster. And then I remember them saying they wanted to add another ball handler, and I think they signed Joe Ingles, obviously, who didn't really play at all, and then PJ Dozier, who I don't think even made it until December, but he was a free agent guy last year, and maybe they add a guy like that, but I think they need a guy. I shouldn't say need, but I think a guy like Malcolm Brogdon or Tyus Jones would fit well into the roster. And then Dante's in an interesting spot because I think they played him out of position last year, and I think that's why his scoring kind of dipped a little bit, because I think he was focused a little too much on facilitating, and that's not his game. So if they do get a point guard and then he can play off the ball where he belongs, I think maybe he gets back up near that 15 points per game range he was at New York in 23-24. So I think they should keep him, and I think they probably will.
Yeah. Wolves continuing to make moves, surprising some people by just running it back. But we're covering it all for you over at Timberwolves on SI as well. It's covering the rest of Minnesota sports over at Vikings, Twins, and Gophers on SI. Go read all of our work over there. Hit subscribe to the YouTube channel. It does help us get found. Greatly appreciate it. Also notifies you every time we post a new video to the channel. We will talk to you tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports. Talk to you then.